What's up, everybody? I am so excited. We have an exciting new guest on the webinar series today. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have Dr. Michelle Turk here to talk to us about one of the hottest topics and most relevant topics in the country, especially in the chiropractic profession. A little bit about Dr. Turk. She's been coaching chiropractors with a focus on personal and professional growth for over 2 decades. I know she started when she was 5. Her areas of expertise include doctor-patient communication, patient education, wellness and practice, office procedures, and business excellence, staff training, and work-life balance. She is the owner of Positive Impact Coaching and Consulting Services and serves as an instructor in the postgraduate department of what was formerly known as New York Chiropractic College. Dr. Turk and I have talked about this. I can never remember their new name, but it's a goal for 2022. She also works with Farmingdale State College. She is a graduate of New York Chiropractic College and ran a high-volume multi-doctor family chiropractic practice. And I'm going to provide you with her contact information in just a little bit. But she's really here to talk about how to build, hire, train, and build your A team, which is so exciting because I always say that really the growth and success of a practice is so dependent upon the team you build, because doc, you can't do it all by yourself, and nor should you want to. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking, stop gushing. Dr. Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here. I just want to confirm that you can see my screen and that we are good to go.
We are good to go.
Great. So thank you for that fantastic intro. Christy and I had the pleasure of meeting at the Women Chiropractors Conference, where she saw me speak and asked if I'd be willing to come speak here, which is always really a pleasure and an honor. And when we were talking about what topics to talk about, because there are all kinds of webinars I could offer, we came up with this one, and we talked about this one because staffing and staff retention really is a problem for many, many chiropractic offices. And as she said, I know you think I started when I was just a youngin', but I have been coaching chiropractic offices for over 20 years. I started in 2000. I find that hard to believe, but it is true. And one of the things that I can really say with certainty is that the practices that are the most successful, and I want you to know, when I define success, that doesn't mean the biggest and making the most money. Success to me means the doctor has the practice that they dream about, a practice that brings them joy and fulfillment and reward. For some people, that's about numbers, but not for everybody. So I just want you to know what I mean when I use that number, that word. But the practices that are achieving the most success have the longest term staff. So I want to say that again. Practices that are successful have long-term staff. They don't have a revolving door that staff are coming and going. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have a long-term staff member that leaves. People move, they retire. Sometimes a great staff member just gets a better opportunity for them in their life at that time. That's not what I'm talking about. We all occasionally have to replace a staff member. But if you've got a challenge where staff are constantly coming and going, it's really hard to build a foundation upon which to grow your practice. So today we're going to start with that whole process from the beginning to the end, so that you could really leave here with some strategies you can implement to build and retain an A team. So the first slide I have to start with, I would be remiss if I didn't, is that it starts with you. I can't tell you how many times and how often I hear, my staff this, my staff didn't do that. I can't get good staff. The truth is, getting good staff, attracting great staff, and keeping them all starts with you, with me, with us, right? We are the captains of our ship. So I found this quote. There was no author, so I can't appropriately give credit, but I love the quote. Every ship needs a captain. The crew is important, but the captain steers everything. And you need to have a clear vision to lead. And I love this because, A, it tells us as the doctors, we've got to take ownership. We are the drivers of our practice, no matter how important our team is. And second, we've got to have a clear vision to lead. One of the challenges with many of the practices I get the pleasure of working with is that there's not a clear vision. So we're going to talk about that next. So it starts with you. So what about me? What about me as a doctor is going to help me create an A team that's going to serve as a foundation for my practice? First of all, there are 3 words: purpose, vision, and mission. And these words often get interchanged. They get used without really understanding what they mean. Here's how I like to explain them. Our purpose, that's our why. Why do we wake up every day? For some people, your purpose may be to be happy. For some people, your purpose may be to serve. My purpose is to positively impact others, thus the name of my company. So knowing your purpose, that's the start. That's the why. Why do we wake up every day? Why do we get dressed and come to our practices? What is your purpose? And again, knowing your purpose and knowing your vision and knowing your mission are critical to even being able to attract the right staff. The second is your vision. Our vision is our what. What is it we do? Now, there are tens of thousands of chiropractors in this country, and more so around the world. And for as many different chiropractors as there are, that's how many different practices there are. So what is your vision, right? Some doctors run a very subluxation-based, philosophically based practice, and their vision is simply to create more wellness, more health, more self-actualization by allowing people's nervous systems to work free of interference. That's a great vision. That's what that practice does. Some people's vision is to be the best rehab facility in their state. That's their vision. What is your what? And one of the challenges is I think a lot of doctors aren't clear on their vision. So they're kind of chasing their tails. They'll go to a seminar, they'll hear something great, and they'll be, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Then they'll go hear something else from a friend. Oh, that's what I'm going to do. Owning your vision, know what you want crystal clearly, know what your what is, what do you offer, is critical, not only to attracting great staff, but of course to attracting patients as well. And finally, what's your mission? What are your aspirations? For some of you, for some of us, it's to have the biggest practice in our communities, the biggest practice in our state. For some of us, it's to have multiple practices. For some of us, it's to serve people, really well on a part-time schedule while balancing family time. For some of us, our mission is we dream of having a multi-specialty practice. Again, there's no wrong in these. There's only what's right for you. So as we get started now into talking about really creating this great team, you've got to start with you. Am I clear in who I am, what I offer, and where I'm going? Because that is a critical first step in really getting the employees and attracting the employees that are going to be, your right and left arms in practice. So now let's talk about actually hiring your A team. So I'm going to try and put some stats that I found interesting. A lot of the stats related to business don't really focus on small business. They focus more on the corporate world. But I found this, and it specifically relates to small business, and I thought it was a really important thing to share with you. A report from the Center for American Progress shows that the median cost of turnover, so the median means so some cost less, but some cost more, was 21% of an employee's annual salary. So a full-time employee making $12 an hour, and by the way, most of our CAs make more of this. The departure of that employee will cost the business owner over $5,200 in lost productivity and replacement costs on an annual basis. Now, does that mean we should retain an employee who's subpar? Of course not, because keeping a subpar employee probably costs a lot more. But it's important to recognize that we don't want lots of turnover. Lots of turnover costs us lots of dollars. And then interestingly, the Harvard Business Review says that 80% of employee turnover is due to bad hiring decisions. So there's a lot of reasons that we get employee turnover. And again, some of it has nothing to do with us. Some of it has to do with the life and circumstances of the employee. But according to the Harvard Business Review, 80% of employee turnover is because we hired poorly in the first place. So I wanted to start there. So how do we hire an A team? The first step, I can't encourage this enough, whether you need an employee now or some point down the road, is write out your ideal employee. And if you have multiple employees, have multiple lists. So have one ideal front desk CA, one ideal associate if you have associates, one ideal insurance CA. Maybe you have a CA that helps you clinically with patients, one ideal patient assistant CA, whatever you call them. And on that list, I want you to keep these lists and have them. Write out every quality, skill, trait, and characteristic that you would want, right? If I were going to wave my magic wand and give you that employee, write out every single quality that you would desire. Next, go back and ask yourself, which ones are non-negotiable? And I'll give you an example. Many of us here are married. I know I'm married. I just celebrated 24 years. If I were to make out my ideal mate before I met my husband, there'd probably be a pretty long list. The ones that are non-negotiable would be certain core values. However, there are going to be some things that would not be on the list that he offers. For instance, he leaves his socks everywhere, right? That would not be on my list. There are some things that you're going to put on your list that are must-haves and some that are negotiable. So for instance, let's say on your ideal employee list for your front desk is outstanding communication, friendly, warm demeanor. To me, those are non-negotiable. But I might also have on my ideal list that they're computer savvy. And the truth is, it probably is negotiable. If I meet someone who has the really higher ones of higher importance to me, but they're not computer savvy, but they're computer comfortable, that might be okay for me for that position. It may not be okay for my billing position. On the other hand, on my billing position, computer savvy, clear communication skills might be non-negotiable ones. Warm and fuzzy, if they're not at my front desk, is negotiable. So I want you to write out these lists, assume everything you want, and then decide which ones are non-negotiable and circle those or highlight those. So the next time you hire, we could take the emotion out of it and you can say, this is what I must have. Ideally, you get everything on the list. But realistically, you want to get your non-negotiables and then some others. Read that list every single day when you're in the hiring process. When you know you need an employee or you're going to need an employee, read that list every single solitary day, right? Put it into the forefront of your brain, right? Now we're talking about the law of attraction. Now what do? Create an ad. And by the way, when you create an ad, right now, there are tons and tons of job openings. So someone scrolling through an ad is seeing hundreds of them. Create an ad that makes people stop, right? That makes people, whether you're posting it on Indeed or LinkedIn or Craigslist, right? Wherever you're creating your ad or posting it at some of the local places in your community, make it an ad that makes people stop, right? Whether you use humor or really expressive words. Then decide where's the best place to post it. Right, like I said, a lot of people go to Indeed and Craigslist and LinkedIn, but get creative. Maybe there's the local community center and the churches and synagogues have online newsletters that are widely read. Maybe your library has an opportunity to post things. Get creative. Decide the best places. And where do we decide the best places? Or where is the person that we're looking for going to see it? So if I'm looking maybe for someone a little older, and I know they tend not to be on LinkedIn, I'm not going to post it there, right? Where would the person who is my ideal person see it? And then lastly, spread the word, right? Often we don't get our ideal employees from the ads. We get them because we're at a dinner party and we're talking about who we needed, and suddenly the person we talk to has the ideal candidate for us. Maybe we go to a local chiropractic meeting, right, of our state association, and we meet someone who said, my CA left because my hours didn't accommodate her, but wow, it sounds like yours would. She's awesome. You just never know. So spread the word. I do recommend, by the way, I know a lot of people will sometimes turn to their patients. I don't think that's ideal because you can jeopardize that patient relationship. And then what if you're not happy? And I don't always think that's the ideal or the family of a patient, though many do it with success. I think it's a ballpark I just prefer to avoid. But get creative, decide where the best place for your ad is and spread it. But now, how do you get that 18? Well, first of all, and what I don't have here is obviously there's a screening on the phone. And they're going to call and have a few simple questions that's going to tell you, is this somebody I even want to interview? And by the way, I have docs that sometimes they'll put in their ad, call between the hours of, right, 12 and 2, right? They only want to be called during their lunch. Why? Because not only is it convenient for them, but it also tells them, is this a candidate who could follow instructions, who reads thoroughly? Or sometimes they'll say, do not call, send resume to. Again, tells us if a person is able to follow directions, and if they don't, they're not even considered. But once you've got your candidates, I suggest a group interview. And I love a group interview for a variety of reasons. First of all, it saves you a lot of time, right? Rather than doing 12 separate interviews, you do one group interview. Second, it gives you the opportunity to see, interact with each other. So what do you do on a group interview? You have the candidates come, make sure you know when they come in. Are they on time? And then you can observe, how are they interacting with each other? You know, even though they're quote unquote competitors sitting around the room, are they cordial? Are they polite? Do they make eye contact? What's their body physiology? So in that group interview, now you're going to give a little bit of a lay lecture, right? You're going to spend 5 or 10 minutes telling all the candidates about the job, about your office, what chiropractic is, what chiropractic isn't. At the end of that, you're going to say, I hope you're all interested in the job. It really is a great opportunity. If you are, please stay and I'll be meeting with you individually. And then one by one, you meet with them. And I would say maybe 5 minutes and have 1 or 2 questions that you have prepared so that you can compare. Why you're interested in this job? What strengths do you foresee bringing to this job? Maybe ask them what they know about chiropractic or what the word health means to them or wellness. And then you're going to narrow that down to a few candidates. Maybe then you'll bring those 2 or 3 back for a longer individual interview. And when you have the candidate that you're pretty confident you're going to hire, I always recommend what I call a shift interview. You invite them in for a shift and you pay them for that because you're asking them to stay, 3 or 4 hours, and have them follow you for a little bit, sit with maybe one of your other employees if you have one, so you can get a feel for how they interact, what kind of questions they ask, what their level of engagement is. There's a saying in the staffing world, it's hire slowly, fire quickly, right? And often we do it the opposite, right? We get someone, something in our gut tells us they're right, and we hire them, right? I can't encourage you enough. Spend the time getting to know this person so you can, with more certainty, bring them on knowing they're a right fit. And of course, firing quickly, if they're the wrong fit, don't try and make a square peg fit into a round hole. End it quickly because it costs, the longer they stay knowing they're not the right candidate, the more it costs you. But hire slowly, spend time doing a group interview, an individual interview, and then what I call a shift interview. But this is also a really important part of the hiring process. Not liking an organization's culture makes an employee 24% more likely to quit. So when you're doing this group interview, an individual interview, and shift interview, look for warning signs that say a prospective employee may not agree with your type of organizational culture. Let's face it, chiropractic is different than many other work environments. It's different than many other healthcare environments. So during the interview process, you want to confirm that this candidate shares your core values, believes in your mission, and is passionate about the role. So how do you do that, right? Because sometimes the best EAs have had no exposure to chiropractic. You want to be open with candidates about the type of culture in your office, right? Ask questions that reveal if a prospective employee is a fit, right? If you're a kind of office that's very, very holistic minded and really promotes healthy nutrition and exercise and certainly talks about subluxation, is that a culture that this employee would fit in? If you're a kind of work environment where people get very close and joke around, is that a work environment that this employee would be comfortable in? So you've got to look at the kind of culture in your office and devise a couple questions that are going to tell you if this prospective employee is a great fit or not. Again, hire slowly. One of the things I will say, a little caveat to all this, is once in a while, we do come across a candidate who is a star at interviewing. They say everything right. They are unbelievable. You're so excited to start them as an employee, and then it seems like their evil twin shows up on the day. Sometimes people's greatest strength is that they're great interviewers. So every now and then, you can go through this whole process and you might have a wrong hire. That's okay. The problem is if it happens repeatedly. Then the problem isn't that you just got unlucky. The problem is your screening process. Next, I want to talk about, once you've got your great employee, what I call onboarding. This is a word used in the corporate world all the time, right? There's onboarding for businesses. If you've ever served on a board of trustees, there's usually an onboarding process. Onboarding is, how do you bring them in? And I think it's one of the big vacuums that we have in chiropractic. We hire these new employees and we train them, but we just throw them into the mix. So how do you welcome a new employee, right? You've gone through this process. You've invested some money in the process of hiring, right? In ads. You've certainly invested a lot of time and energy. How do we get the best return for that? Well, we want that employee to last a long time. So sometimes the right employee doesn't last a long time, not because they weren't the right employee, but because we didn't do a good job. So I can't encourage you enough to spend some time and energy planning an onboarding experience. So first of all, how do you welcome that new employee, right? They come the first day, we know they're nervous, we know they're uncertain, right? Rather than just say, okay, you're going to sit at the front desk and watch for the shift, right? Welcome them. When they come in, greet them at the front door. Have a little swag bag for them, maybe with an office t-shirt or office pens, whatever you have. Have a pad and pen, and pen for them and say, this is for you. We want you to be ready to take notes today. On that first day, let them know that you're going to be taking them out for lunch and you'll be bringing lunch in. Make sure that every member of their team welcomes them, introduces themselves. Have a huddle when they first come, where you tell the team how excited you are to bring them on and let everybody introduce themselves. Make their welcome process one that tells them from the get-go, I'm in the right place. I can't tell you how many CAs have said to me, well, I started at this new job, but I just kind of showed up. And they were like, oh yeah, today's your first day. Make them feel welcome, because that's going to plant seeds, and those seeds will grow into loyalty. Next, who trains them? Very often, we have our CA who's leaving train them, or a CA who's been there train them. And that CA was trained by the prior CA, who was trained by the prior CA. And we all know what happens when we get comfortable with something. When we get comfortable, we take shortcuts. So now you've got a CA who perhaps, is third in line for training. So it's got all kinds of shortcuts. Is that who you want training your new employee? No, you've got to start that training process. You've got to teach this employee, what are your philosophies about customer service, right? About how we care, about the patient-centered nature of our practices. You've got to talk to this employee about what is most important to you. You've got to assure this employee, about who they come to for questions, and we can't train them on everything. Certainly while we're serving patients, we're going to have them learning things like the computer and different procedures by another CA, but it's us who's got to train them as to our philosophy and our principles. Promote cross-department onboarding. So what does that mean? So you may hire a front desk CA, and that front desk CA, other than entering things in the computer, right, the charges and entering payments, may have nothing to do with billing. Still let that CA spend an hour or so with your biller. That CA may have nothing to do with patient care, but if you've got a CA involved in patient care, let them spend an hour or two when they first come on. Not because they're going to do it. I mean, they might have to cover, if that's possible, if you have cross-training. But more importantly, you want them to know, really know at a gut level and understand what's going on in the office, right? I don't want each of my CAs to be, an island. And so we do that from the get-go and set up a schedule, an onboarding schedule, right? They're welcome. And then how they start spending their first day. Make sure day one in that little huddle, when you're introducing them to the team and telling the team how excited you are for them, share your purpose, your mission, and your vision with your team. I I ask each one of you, if you were to turn to your staff this afternoon and ask them if they know your purpose, mission, and vision, hopefully many of you can say yes, but I guarantee some people listening to this, the answer would be they don't know it. Maybe even I don't know it myself. So this is a great time to think about what that is and to make sure you share it. Again, that first day, that first week, that first month, that onboarding process, we are planting seeds in this employee so that employee sprouts not only into a really, really talented employee, but one who is dependable and one who is fiercely loyal, because those are employees that don't leave. And remember, we said the cost of leaving is not only aggravating, but there's a dollar cost to it. Make sure that your new hire follows you, the doctor, and has ample opportunities to ask questions. So I think personally, you should be the first one they follow. They come in, you have this kind of team huddle, let them follow you around for a shift. How can they sell what they don't own? Let them go with you to patients. Tell them, hold off your questions. I'm just going to introduce you to the patients. Watch what I do, and then make sure they have opportunities to ask questions. So sometimes it might be between patients. Sometimes it'll be at the end of the shift. And then on an ongoing basis, you want to know that there are no silly questions. That any questions they have, they want you want them to come to you with them. And finally, make sure that all new employees have a firsthand new patient experience, right? One of the perks of being an employee in a chiropractic office is that they get chiropractic care. Usually most docs offer their employees and their immediate families chiropractic care as an employee perk. But as quickly as possible, put your new hires through a new patient experience. Let them, and not a rush job, right? Again, we can't force this. There are legal issues, but as long as they want it, don't just lay them down and adjust them. Let them fill out paperwork, do a thorough exam, take the same kind of care of your staff as you would any other patient, because they in turn not only are going to get great results for themselves and improve the quality of their health, but now they're going to be able to more eloquently share it, right? You can sell much easier what you own. So really, if you've never used that word onboarding, I hope if that's the one strategy you get out of this, that going forward, your next hire will have a fantastic onboarding experience. Just some things to share. Poor onboarding makes new hires 8 times more likely to become disengaged, right? So imagine that new employee comes on and they're not really welcome. They're just sort of sat down to observe. They go home and their family says, "How was your new job? Tell us about it." I'm like, "Yeah, it was okay. I didn't really talk to the doctor much. Yeah, the other staff seemed nice." Make it a great onboarding experience so that they do not become disengaged. And an onboarding experience in which employees are only instructed in their role, but not made to feel like part of the team, disengages them. And that's what most of us do, quite frankly, most businesses in general. We make sure we teach the new employees their jobs, but we don't make them feel part of the team. Their first day or at the end of their first week, have a welcome lunch. Make them feel like part of the team, where you don't talk about business, but maybe you get to know each other a little bit. The emotional connection that employees feel to their organization influences their productivity, their happiness, and in turn, their desire to stay. And I'm going to keep going back to what I said at the beginning. The most successful practices have long-term employees. So now let's talk about training. So the first question to ask is, when does training start? And the truth is, training starts from that first phone call or your first interview. Training starts as soon as you begin introducing them to what the job is and finding out if they're the right fit. And the next question, when does it end? That's really a trick question, because the answer is never. I have so many offices that don't train. They train at the beginning and that's the end of it. And then they wonder why employees become disengaged. So we all have to own that training is a part of our jobs, just as much as keeping up on our clinical skills is. Training employees is an important part of our job. Next, what materials do you provide? Do you have an employee handbook? Do you have any literature or video that you could provide CAs about chiropractic? Right? Do you do any kind of assessments about personality styles so you can best communicate with this employee? What materials do you provide? Now, there's no one best. It's what's best for you. I know a lot of offices that give their new hires a lot of information about chiropractic. It's what works best for you, but make sure you're providing them with materials or resources or websites so that they can really become the best them possible as well. Have you created an environment where employees are comfortable asking questions? Right? Some docs can't be bothered, and employees come and ask questions, and they're either given a very short answer or they're given a, you should know that by now. Well, if you tell an employee you should know that by now, guess what? They're not going to come with their next question. And if they don't come with their next question, they may turn around and make a mistake that's going to cost you. So if you have to repeatedly answer the same question, you may have to find a different way to answer it, or you may have to ask the staff member why they're having trouble. You keep asking this question, what am I missing? How am I not helping you understand this? What seems to be the problem? Or it may be that they're not right for the job. But you've got to make it so employees feel comfortable asking questions. And that's something you often have to repeat, right? We'll talk for 1 second about staff meetings, but at the end of every staff meeting, who has questions? There's no silly question. Next are team meetings. I cannot stress this enough. Weekly team meetings are critical. Weekly team meetings are critical, preferably at the beginning of the week so you get on the same page, right? Shake off the weekend and really come out of the gates charging. Have everybody come in a half hour early Monday morning, maybe during Monday lunch, but as soon as possible in a week, have weekly team meetings. Now, I've had docs say, well, I don't have much to talk about, I'll cancel it. There is always stuff to talk about. So that brings me to the next point, which is have an agenda. So what goes on an agenda? Maybe every week you start with a team affirmation, right? We're the best office in town. We're here to serve. Maybe that doesn't work for you. I happen to like team affirmations. But maybe then the next thing you cover are all the victories. The doctor shares all the patient victories that they've observed and been told of in that last week, right? Oh, Mrs. Smith told me it was the first week she hasn't had a headache. Mr. Johnson told us it was the first day he was able to complete a full workday without having to lay down. Mrs. Jones told us about what her child's teacher told them about how his behavior has improved. Whatever victories, right, you want to share. That's how you start. Puts everyone in a great mood. Then next on the agenda, any challenges, whether they're your challenges or the team's, right? Oh, last week on Tuesday, we got really backed up. What happened? On Thursday, we had a very difficult patient at the front desk. On Friday, we had, more no-shows than usual, right? Talk about the challenges, evaluate what you could have done better, right? It's not about we didn't make mistakes. Of course, we all make mistakes. How could we have handled it better, right? So you've got victories that you want to share. Handle the challenges of the prior week. Talk about all the new patients that came in the past week. So the team gets to know them. Oh, Mrs. Smith, new patient, 55-year-old female, 2 college-age children. She came in for blank. We have her on it twice a week. She also happens to love tennis, right? Let the team know your new patients. And then always end your staff meetings with some type of professional or personal growth exercise. So it could be, and you could find a team building exercise. It could be something where you work with a team on everybody setting personal goals. It could be you role play a difficult phone call. It doesn't have to be another 20 minutes or 30 minutes. But end that meeting giving your staff some kind of training to help enhance their personal growth or their professional growth. Next, look around. What seminars and webinars and conferences are there? As doctors, we have to look to those because we need our continuing education credits. Well, imagine that your staff needs continuing education credits too. They may not need it to keep a license, but they need it so that they continue to grow with you, right? If you're growing and learning and thriving, and they're not, right? Chain is only as strong as its weakest link. It may be a cliche, but it is so true. So we want, if we're going to grow and continue to learn new things and bring that to our practices, we want our team doing it as well. There are many, many seminars, webinars, and conferences that accommodate staff and have training for them. Now we talk about retaining, right? Because sometimes we do really good at finding new employees, or we think we do. but then they leave. I'm not even talking about employees that we have to let go. I'm talking about really good employees leave, and we don't know why, right? And again, sometimes they move, they retire, they've just got an opportunity they can't turn down. But the more engaged an employee is, the truth is the less likely they're going to be looking for those other opportunities. So what is employee engagement? Employee engagement is a measure of how involved and committed an employee is to their workplace. Engagement can be measured quantitatively, meaning how productive are they, or qualitatively, based on their emotions, their loyalty, and their satisfaction. Gallup poll showed when they looked at businesses that ranked very high in employee engagement compared with those businesses that ranked very low, the businesses that had a high degree of engaged workers, right? I guess self-defined, had 28% less shrinkage, 41% lower absenteeism, less quality defects, and less turnover. And that all factored in to a doubling of financial success. So I want you to think about that. If my employees are success, I will be more successful financially. And that's a really important concept for us to own. So if you do nothing else today but think about how can I go engage my workers more? Well, one of the top ways to do that is employee recognition. And that doesn't mean a trophy once a year, right? A recent Achievers report revealed companies identified recognition as having the greatest impact on employee engagement. 79% of employees who quit their jobs cite a lack of appreciation from their employer as a key factor in their decision to leave. So that doesn't mean that you recognize employees every day by handing them a big bonus check. But at the end of the day, before you leave, do you say to your team, thank you so much, today was a great day? If you happen to overhear a staff member speaking to a patient in the office or maybe on the phone and they do a great job, do you stop and say, wow, I heard you talking to so-and-so. That was great communication, thank you. When a staff member communicates with a patient, so if a patient was slipping off their schedule and that staff member re-engages that patient, do you say, wow, you did a great job with Mrs. So-and-so. Thank you so much. When your employees refer their family and friends in, do you thank them? People want to be appreciated. And there are many ways to retain staff, but appreciation is a really, really important piece of it. 37% of employees claim recognition is the most important form of employer support. Now, of course, it's only 37%. The rest may say financial remuneration is. But it is important to know that employee recognition really doesn't cost us much, other than an effort and our intention. Employee recognition is critical. So many employees work so hard and they just feel underappreciated. So therefore, they're less engaged, and now they're going to go searching on Indeed. If they feel recognized and appreciated and valued, they don't necessarily have the motivation to go looking. This is important. Criticize constructively, right? Sometimes even great employees and employees that we like make mistakes, and we have to critique them, but do it constructively, right? So how do we do that? Well, a door is always open to criticize constructively if you're making sure that when they do something right, you're acknowledging it. In the book Well Done by Ken Blanchard, he talks about accentuate the positive, redirect the negative. So if I'm going to talk to a CA about, for instance, a poor communication they had with a patient that I overheard, I may say, in general, you're very warm to the patients and I know how much they like you. However, how did you think that communication went? And by the way, one great way to redirect the negative is to first ask a question, because that engages them and then you can open up that conversation. So I'm not saying that in order to recognize employees, we can't constructively criticize them. Of course, sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes we're not happy with something. If an employee is continually coming in late, you've got to call them out on it. But what I'm going to say is, when you're here, you do a great job. I love having you on the team. However, you've been coming late repeatedly. Is there something going on? Traffic, whatever. But you're going to say, listen, I love having you here, but I need you here on time. We're a team. And until we're all here, we can't function. It's not fair to the team. It's not fair to our patients. I need you here on time. Are we clear? Right? So in no uncertain terms, you're telling them it's not okay, but I've done it in a constructive way, not a destructive way. So they walk around feeling the onus is on them, not that they've just been berated. And then, of course, other ways to retain your A team. Are you paying them? a client of mine who's in a rural area in Maine just told me that the McDonald's is paying $16 an hour. So if she pays 16, what kind of employee is she attracting? Not that there's anything wrong with working in a McDonald's, but we want paraprofessionals in our office. So make sure that your salary acknowledges that you want to keep that team member. Do you give them paid time off? So many offices, after a year, give a few days of paid time off. I don't want an employee in my office who hasn't had some time to rest and rejuvenate and recharge themselves. So make sure you include paid time off. And by the way, that's another way, if someone's at a pretty high salary already, to reward them, give them more paid time off. What perks do you give them? Certainly chiropractic care for themselves and their families. Do you have any kind of a retirement plan that you can put them in? What other kind of perks can you offer? What about bonuses? If you're growing and you've got, growing collections, throw a bonus at your employees. And again, some offices have all kinds of crazy bonus systems. If the practice does this, you do that. They're not your partner. They don't need to be making a percentage based on what you're making. You're the one taking the financial risk. When the practice grows, it's yours. However, being grateful and acknowledging the people that helped you get there, right? So if you have a record collections month and your billing CA did a great job and your front desk CA did a great job that helped achieve that, just give them a bonus. It's unexpected. And again, it breeds loyalty. And finally, where can you show tokens of appreciation? If you have a really great week, maybe you hit some goals, come in the next week. Give everybody a gift card for a mani-pedi, or give everybody an Amazon gift card, right? Little tokens of appreciation go a long way in retaining your 18. With staff meetings, ordering lunch, all these little things don't cost you a lot, but they breed loyalty, which breeds retention. And then finally, I can't end without talking about this. Who do you need to be to lead an A team? And it's funny, I was working on this PowerPoint and my husband walked in and he says, what does that mean? That doesn't even make sense. Who do you need to be? He's like, doesn't it mean what skills do you have to have? And I'm like, no. Who do you need to be to lead an A team? What kind of a person leads an A team? What kind of a person shows up in that office every day? So we could do 3 hours on this alone, but I'm just going to come up with, a top list. 1, do you have a clear vision? Because if you don't have a clear vision and you're busy chasing your tail, guess what? So is your team. You've got to have a clear vision, knowing who you are, what you do, so that they can join that vision with you, so they can be part of accomplishing that vision. You've got to have it and you've got to share it with them. And by the way, if it changes, that's okay. Just make sure you own it and that they own it. Next, do you have certainty? One of the biggest challenges in chiropractic practice I have found, and I'm doing this a long time working with offices, is that they often lack certainty, meaning certainty about their philosophy, certainty about how they want to practice, they lack certainty about how they want to bill and charge and what services they want to offer and don't. So it's, soup du jour. Every day it's something different. Now, it doesn't mean we can't change, but have certainty. Own your procedures, own your office policies and procedures and rules. Own your philosophy. How do you want to practice? There is no rules about how to practice other than the laws of your state. Own who you are in practice and what you want to accomplish in practice. Just because someone else does it different doesn't make it better. It's better for them. What's best for you? Be certain about that. Integrity in how you work with your patients, integrity in how you can work with your staff, integrity in how you bill, integrity in how you communicate. If you want to have an A team, you've got to be completely filled with honesty and integrity. You've got to be an excellent communicator. So many of us have great staffs that leave because we didn't communicate well with them. And by the way, that's a struggle for some of us, and that doesn't make you bad, it doesn't make you wrong, but it means you've got to find a way. And by the way, we might not communicate our best the same with every employee. So you might have one employee that likes to be really short and to the point, and your best communication with that employee is to be a little more direct. You might have another employee who is more expressive, and they're going to hear you best if you communicate in a more expressive way. So be an excellent communicator. With that comes being an active listener. An active listener means just that, right? When your staff is talking, listen. Give them your eye contact, right? Don't interrupt, right? We have 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we speak. Let your staff know that if they come to you, they have 100% of your attention, that you're not listening to them while you're thinking about lunch or the next patient. And if the time's not right, by the way, you can say, this is important. I'd like to hold off this conversation till lunch or till the end of shift or till tomorrow. But be an active listener. If you say that, it means you're actively listening. Lead by example, right? Do what I say, not what I do, right? That, of course, not leading by example now challenges our integrity, right? But if there are procedures you want your staff to follow, you've got to follow them. You can't take shortcuts if you don't want them to take shortcuts. If you want them to be able to communicate the necessity of regular chiropractic care, then you've got to be getting it. If you want them to get it, and if you want your patients to get it, right? Lead by example. Be compassionate. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to be so compassionate that we accept poor performance. You know, I had a doctor who had a staff member who had lost a child, a horrific loss. There's no words, right? And I had just started working with the doctor, and he repeatedly complained about this staff member. And I said, and he told me what had happened with a child. And I said, how long ago did this happen? And it was like 7 years before. And so I said, it's horrific and she'll never get past it. But how long are you supposed to give her a pass? Right? So we have to be compassionate, which is wonderful. We have to balance that with, that's not an excuse to do a poor job. But be compassionate. You know, if a staff member comes in late and they're never late, and the reason is because their kid was having a meltdown, okay. If it only happens once in a blue moon, I'm compassionate. Be flexible. This is important. Now, that doesn't mean that they can work when they want, you know, how they want. We have an office to run, and most importantly, we have patients to serve. Because when we serve our patients well, remember, when our practices are growing, we do better financially. Maybe we have more joy and fulfillment, but that is all a byproduct of helping people be healthier. So flexible doesn't mean people can do whatever they want, but where possible, right? Take your compassion and use it to be flexible. So if team members want to swap shifts, okay. If somebody's asking you to maybe change a procedure because they think it might be better, be an active listener, listen to the why, and be flexible enough to say maybe they know better than me. They're the one doing it every day. The combination of these qualities alone, and we can probably list dozens more, but if you showed up as this person every day and really focused on engaging your employees, on breeding loyalty, on treating them well, right, in many ways, acknowledging them, recognizing them, and showing up as this, I assure you that the difference will pay off. You will love coming in. You will love, if you have to say to yourself, oh, I don't want to go in, I can't even stand my CA, I don't want to see her, then it's time for a switch. You want to come in excited to see your team, excited to have fun, make money, and most importantly, help people get healthier. Because that's the byproduct of what we do. People get healthier. And when we improve the quality of people's health, we improve the quality of their life. So I know I threw a lot of information at you in a pretty short time. My website is positiveimpactcoaching.com. You are free to go onto that website. There are ways, you'll see there are clicks if you want to schedule some time to talk to me. If you have any questions or comments about anything that I've talked about, my email is also up here on the screen, Michelle@positiveimpactcoaching.com. If you have a question or comment, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michelle. I have one quick question for you, and I think this is a fabulous question that Katie sent me, because this is one of the things I despise most about the whole hiring process. She says she has a situation with an employee that seemed like a fantastic fit during the interview process, but then now that they're there, they're like consistently dropping the ball with things. So what kind of questions can they ask in an interview to help avoid that in the future? I always joke that we meet this really incredible person to work in the office, and then their evil twin shows up on day one.
Right. I actually said that. I talked about that. Sometimes that happens. So that's a great question. So what you have to ask is what is it that she's dropping the ball? So what questions would you then ask on an interview? So for instance, you might want to say to an employer, prospective employee, tell me how you are at multitasking. And they're going to likely say, I'm great. Say, great. Can you give me an example in your life where you've multitasked?
I love those questions.
And by the way, they may be a stay-at-home mom up until now, and they, believe me, they're the best multitaskers, but I want to hear them say that. Another great question to ask is, can you think of a time that you had a challenge that you handled poorly? If you had it to do over, what would you do? Because that tells you, can a person be insightful if they're making mistakes?
I love those. My favorite, I have what I call seed questions that have like the most popular answers to stuff they post on the internet. And if they give me one of these consistent answers, then I know that it's very unlikely that that's really about them and it requires more questions. But I love ones where they have to example. Tell me how you are at problem solving. Great. Give me an example.
Tell me in your last job, one challenge you faced. Or one challenging situation. How'd you handle it? And if you had it to do over, would you do it the same or not?
We used to have this. My favorite was we used to ask people to give us 3 examples of strengths and then 3 examples of weaknesses. But I love that their weaknesses really were like strengths, right?
Well, a good interviewer will sometimes tell you that their weaknesses are strengths. Like, you know.
I'm like, red flag, red flag.
It's about weeding out. But I always just ask them how they've handled it. Ask for examples.
Yes. And they will sometimes struggle with them, which means that maybe they're not so good at multitasking, or maybe they're not a very good problem solver. So, but that's something that we all have to deal with in hiring. And it's so funny because I know in the past we would push ourselves to our limits to avoid that having to bring somebody on board kind of thing. And what we have learned is that that's not a good way to bring people on board, is when we're so stressed out that we should have hired somebody 6 months ago.
Yes. So sometimes, the challenge in practice growth is, right, as we grow, we're making more money. There comes a point that to continue to grow, we first have to spend more money.
You do.
Bringing on. And if you get to the point where you feel you needed someone yesterday, you waited too long.
You did. And it's about really being proactive, especially when you really want to have that time where people are not at 100% capacity. We want them somewhere at like 80 to 90%. Like if we continue at this growth rate, they're going to be maxed out, right?
Right.
But right now they have just enough time to help in that onboarding process, especially with cross training, which I love. I think that helps to eliminate divisions and cliques within the practice, because everybody's job is dependent on somebody else, but they don't, and everybody thinks their job is more important than everybody else until they understand what it is that everybody else does. So I love so much about what you talked about, and all the things of like why we have to build this plan, because you really touched on that. And I know you and I touched on that a couple of months ago when we talked about it. Y'all should have seen her live and in person.
The one thing that we really have to remember is that we want to, if you're a gardener, and I'm not, but it's a good analogy, right? We plant seeds and then we cultivate it, right? We do stuff with our soil. We make sure the lighting's right? Some people really baby their gardens. We need to do that with our team. And I don't mean baby them, but I mean cultivate them, right? We plant the seeds with a great onboarding experience. We cultivate them by acknowledging them, appreciating them. Sometimes at the end of the day, just saying thank you, you did a great job today, goes so far. So, and we forget, it's hard. Remember, we're not just running a business, we're taking care of patients. We got a lot of balls up in the air every day. We've got the clinical end, the business end.
What do you do when you have an employee who consistently questions an office manager and seems to have a lack of respect for them? How do you get them to become more respectful?
You sit and you have a conversation. You ask what the challenges are. I always start by asking, I noticed this, what seems to be the challenge, and then listen. And sometimes there is a real problem that you need to address with your office manager. Sometimes it's just a headbutting and you need to bring the two in to problem solve. Or sometimes it's the wrong employee because she's not someone who's willing to take direction.
I
It's
love I love
but
that.
you start with a one-on-one with that employee, and again, ask. I always say wherever you can, ask and listen. Right? I noticed this. What's going on? And just sit back and listen.
So true. Well, I just wanted to give y'all an update. So next week is our last webinar of the year. We're going to have Heather Simmons, my coworker, is going to be talking about who cares what you charge, which is the very same presentation that she did when we were at the WDC Unconvention. We got so much incredible feedback. She also did it as a webinar earlier this year for a couple of state associations, and they're trying to book her again. So we just decided to put it on our calendar to make it easier for everybody to attend, because with Heather's schedule and the closing of the year, we're just not going to have a lot of time to book her 100 times to get it in for everybody. And this is a really great time to be evaluating your fees. So if you haven't registered for that, make sure you do. Don't worry, even if you miss it, we're going to make sure you have access to that recording. You can also see it right here. No, that's the webinar presenter application right here. Visit the archive. You can click here and have access to all of these webinars. Then we're going to come back in January and talk about social media that converts. We have 2 webinars right out of the gate. The No Surprises Act. We're going to talk a little bit about personal injury. We're going to talk about Biden tax law changes and how they affect your practice. And then we're going to talk about the future of the workforce. What separates these new, younger employees that we're bringing into our practice, and their priorities are a little bit different than those of employees who've already been with you for a decade. So it's like, how do we make this work? And that's whether you're looking for a CA, an office manager, a biller, an associate doctor. And Aaron Reynolds did this presentation for the Congress of Chiropractic State Associations in November. And we've had so much wonderful feedback. We decided to share that information and have him bring it to all of our doctors and teams out there who are watching the webinar series. I want to thank you guys so much for being a part of the webinar today. And if you're watching this as a recording, I posted Dr. Michelle's contact information in the chat log, so you can see that too. You can email me, and I'll make sure that if you have questions, we get those over to Dr. Michelle, or you can email her directly. We want to thank you so much for taking 1 hour out of your day to be a part of the webinar series today. And we will see you the same time, same place next week. Bye, y'all.